Good afternoon, my name is Max Chan, and I'm going to take you through this unit. The first topic is information security governance. This involves meeting internal and external requirements. There are a few benefits to this. The first is improving trust in customer relations, protecting the organization's reputation, better accountability for safeguarding information during critical business activities, and reduction in loss through better incident handling and disaster recovery. The desired outcomes of this, of which there are 6, are strategic alignment, risk management, value delivery, resource management, performance measurement, and integration. You basically need metrics to make sure that all of this stuff happens and that they're spread organizational wide. There are 3 major groups who hold responsibility for making sure these objectives are met. First of all, you have the board of directors, high level and set direction for the way the organization wants to go. Senior executives make sure that shit happens and provide oversight for management functions, and the CISO is generally responsible for the strategy, ensuring, developing and liaising with the other 2 groups. The maturity model is essentially a self-assessment. So you decide where your organization is, where it wants to be, you plan how it's going to get there, and you prioritize based on the projects that will have the most beneficial impact on getting you towards that goal. The maturity model itself runs 0 to 5 through non-existent to initial, repeatable, defined, managed, and finally optimized levels of maturity. There's a lot to be said for the different types of risk, but essentially risk is an event with an impact and a probability.
Governance has
this
some objectives,
contrasts
risk
to an
management,
issue,
and
which
that's
essentially a common view of risk across the enterprise with an integrated risk management across the enterprise, risk-aware business decisions across the enterprise, and assuring that risk management controls are implemented and operating effectively across the enterprise. To ensure this happens, you can follow the 4-stage risk management lifecycle, where you identify a risk, you assess the risk, you respond and mitigate the risk, and then you monitor the controls and report accordingly. There are 2 objectives of risk: maintaining CIA and protecting data at rest, in transit, and in use. Whoever said risk management was perfect? The problems that can occur within risk management is risk that is poorly described, unachievable, ineffective, and disproportionate mitigating actions, poor control between the risk owner and the risk mitigation owner, not defined properly, stakeholder involvement, and a reactive versus a proactive approach, an over-reliance on incidents, threats, and non-compliance happening before you move on to properly manage the risk. You want to make sure that risks are reported, so you make sure that employees are aware of the ability to report risk. Make it easy and simple. When they submit a risk submission, make sure that you ask questions and make sure that it is a risk and not an issue. Remember, a risk has a probability, an issue does not. Mitigation controls stop shit from happening. Continuity plans address the impact once shit has happened. To manage risk, you first identify, put it in a risk register, describe it, assess the likelihood and impact, and use that to give it a risk rating. Give a recommended mitigation treatment. You then have a continuity position to deal with the impact if possible. You assign a risk owner who's going to be responsible for it. You agree a mitigation owner who's responsible for the controls, and you obtain a decision. Do you want to reduce, accept, avoid, or transfer? And then you monitor progress until the target risk level has reached the organizational requirements. And then you produce monthly status reports after that to make sure that you stay that way. Business case is essentially you going to management and going, oi, our company needs an information security program. Here's why. It's common sense. Moving on. To save you some time, this slide basically says that security should align with business needs. Great. Architecture is a bit like DIY, planning, designing, creating, and responding security to meet the needs of the organization. A framework is using a blueprint, it's a template, it's structured, it's pre-done, and it's going to help you meet compliance a lot easier. Balanced scorecard is essentially there to make sure that the security program aligns with the business needs. It has 4 angles: financially, customerly, business processy, and measuring of learning and growth. With any security program, there's stuff that can get in your way. Just for a definitive list, it's legal, physical, ethical, cultural, organizational, cost, personal resources, capability, time, compliance, and risk acceptance tolerance levels, basically risk appetite of the organization. I remember elements of a security program as 3 ways. First of all, you have the information security governance that provide the guidelines, the controls that protect stuff, and then you have the people. So awareness, compliance enforcement, personal security, you name it. Good fun. So looking more at architects and frameworks, SABAS is business-driven security architecture. It has a 4-stage life cycle. So you strategy and concept what you want to do, you design it properly, you then implement it into the business, you measure it and you manage it, make sure it's doing what you want, the way you want, and based on that feedback you then move back onto strategy and concepting your next control. Everyone's favourite, Qubit 5 has 4 stages. You plan and you organise. You acquire and you implement. You deliver and you support. And then you continuously monitor. There are examples on the slides for each one. Remember that Corebit is built for operational level IT governance, which is middle tier, as opposed to strategic, which is at the top of the organisational hierarchy. If you were looking for something strategic, look no further than the COSO Strategic Corporate Governance Model. Information on the slides. Moving on. Here we're basically just taking the maturity model, giving it its full name, the System Security Engineering Capability and Maturity Model, and we're looking at the 3 main concerns that drive this: assurance, risk, and engineering, and we're breaking down the 5 levels from non-existent all the way up to continuous improvement. You wanted to move up the security maturity model, you would follow this pathway to achieving higher levels. It starts with strategy, you then make policy to move towards the strategy, you make sure there's awareness for the policy, you look at implementation, monitoring, ensure compliance, and back to strategy again. Policy, procedures, standards, and guidelines. In case you're wondering the difference, a policy is a direction of control philosophy of an organization created by senior management. A procedure is a detailed step-by-step guide to implement policy. A standard is an image of what's acceptable, and a guideline is a recommendation and acceptable alternative. Back to metrics again, we can see you have 3 major types. Strategic is essentially management and high-level metrics. Tactical is metrics that follow compliance and the people side of things, and operational is technical. Information is bound by a life cycle and should be managed. So first of all, you plan, design, build what you're going to do with the information, and then you actually acquire the information. After that, you then use and operate the information for whatever purpose you wanted it for, and while that's going on, you make sure you monitor it. Once you're finished with the information, you dispose it appropriately, and then you move on to your next project, where you will plan, design, build, and acquire the information again. Since this is quite an important model, here is a breakdown of what falls under each step and the activities that it may include. Please excuse the error, the one on the right should say disposal. Step by step, how to develop an information security management program. First of all, you determine the desired security outcomes. You define the security objectives, determine the current state, perform a gap analysis of where you want to be, develop your strategy to close that gap, create a roadmap to navigate that strategy, develop a program to implement that strategy, and then you manage your security program to continuously meet those objectives and eventually achieve those initial desired outcomes. Feeding into most of these steps is the risk management activities. So how does this differ depending on the size of the organization? Starting with big boys, they have fast growing, huge budgets. However, it's spread over a large number of users, so the cost per user tends to be the lowest. They are very mature, have a lot of strategy, and often have full-time personnel. Medium organizations tend to ignore some security functions and are often worse at security than any other organizational size. They have the ability to set some policy and handle incidents relatively effectively. However, they tend to ignore a lot of this security. Small organizations, because they're so simple, they can outsource their security, and they may have a bit of formal policy or planning. However, the cost per user is higher because there's less users. This slide basically looks at how frameworks and roles come together with responsibilities. I don't think it's particularly important. Moving on. When developing this program, there are 3 major things you want to look at: reaching those defined objectives, reaching that desired state in the maturity model, and the level of residual risk being where you want it to be. You've got some challenges such as overrunning costs, metrics, and upcoming policy and standards. Pitfalls can be resistance by staff, failure of strategy, less job functionality due to security, and ineffective project management. When you are implementing this strategy according to the roadmap, you're going to want to follow a plan, do, check, act methodology, PDCA. Basically, you create the strategy and the policy first before you do anything. You execute the control and integrate it into the organization. You check, so that's your semi-audit built in, and then you act on that audit to continuously improve the control that you put in place. Hey, guess what? More metrics. So metrics can be broken down into management and tactical, which we've already discussed, is surrounded by people. Operational, that's technical, and strategic is upper management, making sure everything is on track. Why you want to measure performance is to reduce risk, support the business integration, make sure that it complies, maximize productivity and cost effectiveness, make sure that security awareness is happening properly, and measure and manage performance. For each of those 6 objectives that we have discussed so thoroughly, there is examples of metrics that you may want to include. Next, you have the threat model, 3 types: failures, internal and external threats. Failures, hardware, software, and misconfiguration. Internal, willful destruction, people breaking stuff on purpose. Theft, people stealing stuff on purpose. Abuse of privilege or resources, using legitimate access to do something illegitimate. And accidental, unintended. External threats include social engineering, worms and viruses, DOS attacks, hackers, misconfigured and unconfigured devices. It's important to know the difference between incident response and incident management. Incident response is a part of incident management where you respond to an incident to control and limit damage. Incident management is everything else, such as acquiring the budget, putting the strategy in place, etc., etc., etc. The incident management lifecycle, not to be confused with the incident response lifecycle, goes like this. You plan and prepare for an incident, you detect an incident, triage the resources that you want to distribute and investigate with those limited resources. You contain the attack, analyze what's going on, track, and move on to a recovery phase. After that, you do a post-incident assessment and you close the incident. Business continuity planning versus incident response. So, business continuity planning, it has a broader scope. How are you going to deliver your service and continue to do business after an incident, whether incident response planning is literally dealing with security related threats, systems, networks, data, and getting that stuff back up and running. So you have two teams. The incident management team, which, as I said before, will deal with business continuity planning, risk management, obtaining reviews, performance, requirements, budgeting, that kind of thing. And they'll have underneath them an incident response team that will handle a specific incident. The incident response plan or life cycle has 6 phases. So first of all, plan for an incident, get your kit bag together with all your stuff. Identify when an incident has taken place and verify that it's actually happened. Contain the incident and escalate if needed. Analyze and eradicate what you found. Recover, get systems operating at normal levels, and then draw up a lessons learned report which will feed into your planning for the next incident. Here is a breakdown for the different stages of the incident response lifecycle and things that should happen and questions that you can ask at each stage. Incident response management capability is important because it provides a structured, logical approach to chaotic situations, allows you to be efficient with dealing with incidents. It helps you break incidents into smaller, more manageable phases that can be logically addressed, and it provides evidence of due diligence if an investigation were to occur. Assurance is the need of making sure that something meets the needs of the enterprise and provides the sought after outcomes. There are 3 considerations that you consider under this. First is policies and procedures. Second is the people. And the third is the technology. And these assurance considerations fall under how you deal with incidents. Good luck, have fun. I've been Max Chan. Until next time.